Earlier today, I took the time to watch some Star Fox 64 videos. I've been re experiencing the game and thinking about a lot in preparation for the release of Star Fox on Nintendo Switch 2. And it dawned on me right when I was watching this sequence that, you know, you know, I think Star Fox Zero is in fact a sequel to the Star Fox 64 bad ending. Because we all know Star Fox Zero is not a remake, it's not a reimagining, it's not some weird reboot. Like it's very clearly a sequel, like gameplay wise, but a lot of people have gotten hung up on this idea that like, well, because the plot is similar, that means it has to be a remake, right? It means it has to be a reboot. Well, no, actually, because in Star Fox 64, you have clearly distinct endings. Now, traditionally, we referred to these as the bad ending and the true ending. But really, if you think about it, the bad ending isn't all that bad because you do indeed go on Venom, you take out like the Venom forces, you beat Andross, you win the war. You just don't put Andross out of commission. Like all that happens is that you get this image of his silhouette against the sun, indicating that he's going to return someday. When you think about it in that context, when you think about like what actually happens in Star Fox 64 and how the game is actually structured, like there's nothing to indicate which of the two endings is actually the definitive one. Is it the one where Andross is taken out for good, or is it the one where he is hinted at returning someday? Again, both versions were open to interpretation at the time, but it became clear with the immediate sequels, with Star Fox Adventures, Assault Command, that they were going with the ending that where Andross was defeated. You know, that was very clear with the continuity. That was very clear with like the direction the series was going, and it was a major plot of the story in a lot of these games. You know, Adventures ends with the big reveal that like Andross was secretly behind everything, and then the series just continues as if he's been defeated for good this time. And what's interesting about Zero is that it doesn't really do that. Like Zero does this thing where Andross is attacking Corneria. It's the same as it's always been, and it's very easy to imagine that like this is just a reboot of 64, that it's the same exact thing again, but it clearly isn't.
I'm bored.
It has been 10 whole days since we left Soria, you know.
They went to Soria. Now, if you remember in Star Fox Adventures, the reason they were sent to Soria initially was because the planet was breaking apart and because General Pepper wanted to prevent the planet from exploding. So, what ends up happening in that game is that it turns out Andross was behind everything and it was all a giant scheme to revive himself. But in this hypothetical scenario in which Zero is a sequel to 64, 64's bad ending, and that Andross was never defeated, all of that was unnecessary. Star Fox went to Soria, did whatever they needed to do to stop the planet from exploding, and then they went home. There was no like grand conspiracy. There was no Andross. There was no like, wider scheme. And as a result of that, they never met Crystal because Andross was the one who kidnapped Crystal. He was the one who kept her locked away. And that's how they met, because of Andross. So in this continuity, Star Fox Adventures still happened, but it played out differently and it had a different resolution. It was just a minor incident for the Star Fox team. Falco never left, Crystal never joined, and the team is still well employed by Corneria because the war with Andross is still ongoing. Because remember, Andross has not been defeated and business for them is still good.
Seriously, you guys. The Cornerian army and Andross's forces have been at war for years now, and here you are always joking around.
Notice how he says this, that Corneria's been at war with Venom for years. But the way the characters act and the way they talk, the idea is that like they're not really a threat to Corneria, that the war is kind of at a stalemate, and that they're still at war, but there's no real danger or threat of invasion from the Venom forces because Star Fox has already beaten Venom once. They crippled their core infrastructure, they took all their planets back, and essentially repelled the initial invasion, even though that Andros was not taken out. So over the past 5 years, as Corneria has rebuilt, as it's like rebuilt its defenses, as it's like controlled the system, Andros has been rebuilding his forces and preparing for his next invasion. And the threat still exists. People are aware that he's out there and up to no good, but at the same time, the characters just have never encountered him and have never like been able to put a stop to him personally. Because remember, in the bad ending to Star Fox 64, you don't actually destroy Andros. What you destroy is a robotic duplicate. So to sum up, in the bad ending continuity, Star Fox Adventures just doesn't happen as we see it in the true ending continuity. And when it ends, Andros launches his second invasion 5 years later, attacks the Corneria again using the top secret teleportal technology. And this results in essentially the Star Fox equivalent of World War II, in which we go through the same exact thing again. So what Zero is essentially is that it's a different war featuring the same players fighting for control over the same system, years down the line. It is a sequel to Star Fox 64, not a remake, not a reboot, not a reimagining, a straight up sequel. And evidence for this can be found all throughout the Star Fox Zero itself. So, for example, you have this guy who says he's looking for payback, but you've never actually fought this guy in Zero. He's one of the first bosses. He's an alternate path in the first stage that you would not encounter on your first playthrough. In the context of the story, you've never met this guy in Star Fox Zero. But when you really start thinking about it, considering how many of the commanders are individuals we saw in the original Star Fox Zero, suddenly all of these reoccurring characters make sense. Like, they're the same characters that have come back 5 years later with improved technology, improved skill sets, they're improved boss fights, and they're doing everything they can to take you out. Nothing in Star Fox Zero indicates that Star Fox 64 never happened. Quite the contrary. Everything that happens in this game seems to have roots in what happened in that game. You see a lot of the same characters, you see a lot of callbacks, you see a lot of references, you see a lot of them of familiar locations throughout the Lylat system. It is a direct sequel to the bad ending of Star Fox 64. So what does this mean for the future of the franchise? What does it mean for the new Star Fox remake that's coming out? Well, I think in a lot of ways, the remake of Star Fox is going to be a recursive prequel. If Star Fox Zero was a sequel to Star Fox 64, this is being specifically made to be a prequel to that, in which a lot of the elements and the aspects of Zero are going to be built up on and expanded on and develop more organically into an overarching plot that creates a more cohesive narrative, because there are definitely a lot of weird contradictions and lore things that have changed since back in the day. Like, back in the original Super Nintendo Star Fox, like, James was stuck in a parallel universe as opposed to being dead, and then 64 claimed he was dead, and then Zero implies he wasn't again. Like, there's all these indication that there's like quite a bit more going on behind the scenes of these games than we understand. Considering how the remake promises to expand on the lore, the setting, like the universe of Star Fox as a brand, I am definitely very interested to see just how they build off on Zero with this remake. And this is definitely going to happen. Anybody who thinks Zero is going to be brushed under the rug and ignored is just completely delusional, because this is the same company that brought Star Fox 2 out of cancellation like 26 years later. Okay. Star Fox Zero is an important, integral part of the franchise now, and that is never going to change. It is the best entry in the series by far. It's by far the most difficult. It's by far the most fun to play. And it will remain a fan favorite for all of us who really delve into the gameplay side of Star Fox for years to come. One of my deepest wishes for the remake is that I want more people to appreciate what Star Fox Zero does well, because Star Fox Zero is a fantastic game, one of my all-time favorites, but people write it off and ignore it for really weird, strange reasons. And this is a really good example of that, because people were so willing to call it a reboot or a reimagining or a remake, and they didn't want to refer to it as what it actually was. They didn't want to call it a direct sequel. I'm Harman Smith, and Star Fox Zero is one of my favorite games of all time.